Esther Perel is a psychotherapist and international advisor on sex and relationships that Oprah Winfrey called one of the 100 most influential people in the world. She went from growing up in Belgium with Holocaust survivors to being a highly paid psychotherapist who helps people move from not being dead to being truly alive. Need motivation?
Watch a Top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men. All my life, like 9 for my top 10, top 10, 9. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Esther Perel, and my take on her top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Okay, let's kick it off with rule number 1. Take responsibility.
As you've worked with all different people through these relationships, is there a sort of like common mark or common marks of successful relationships that come up time and time again?
Yeah. You know, I'm a couples therapist, and I don't know if you know, but in couples therapy, rarely do people come to tell you what they have done wrong. They don't really come to tell you what's the matter with them. They come to a drop-off center, and they come to tell me, this is my partner, you know, I will be the expert on what's wrong with that person and fix it. I think by definition, relationships that do well are relationships where people take responsibility for their share without being mired in shame for it. And so it's safe to take responsibility, safe to own your stuff. And people have a sense that, you know, if you want to change the other, you change yourself.
Rule number 2, aim high.
I always had a clear sense that my life was not going to be small.
Sure.
My life has to be big.
Mm-hmm.
Big doesn't mean successful and money. Big meant meaningful, rich, layered, you know.
It's not necessarily well known or famous, but feeling full. Yeah, not dead.
Not dead. I mean, there's a reason I write about eroticism, right?
Yes.
And that sense that I was not going to be mediocre. You know, I'm not content with just the average of something, that it has to be not the best, it has to be the right one for me at that moment. That may be the beautiful spot or the right friend to be with or the right act to take in relation to somebody or to some cause. But that sense that my life has to be big.
Rule number 3, define infidelity for yourself.
The interesting thing is that it's not because you don't talk about something that it doesn't exist. And if I go and I ask audiences all over the world for the past, since 2009 now that I began the research on this book, how many of you have been affected by the experience of infidelity? About 80% of the people raised their hand. Mm-hmm. And that means that they were the children of parents who were unfaithful, or they were the children who were born in an affair, in a love story.
Really?
Or they were the siblings, or they were the friend that was consoling a broken heart, or they were the friends that was listening to the confidences of someone who's in the throes of an affair, or they are the third in the triangle. It is systemic. But the topic of infidelity, which has been historically condemned, is historically practiced, shrouded in secrecy and shame, and hence kept very, very silent, and unfortunately not helpful to the thousands of people who grapple with it. So I've spent the last years working with hundreds of couples who've been shattered by the experience of an affair and of infidelity in the US and abroad. And I thought we can do better.
So what's the definition of infidelity then? Or how should we be defining it? Is it thinking about being with other people? Is it flirting? What's the line? What's the boundary? What's the definition?
So the definition keeps on expanding. That's the first thing. It is no longer just because you got pregnant from somebody else. With contraception today, the definition has become, is it watching porn? Is it chatting? Is it a massage with happy endings? Is it staying active on your dating apps when you're already seeing somebody more steadily? Is it reconnecting with your exes on Facebook? it is actually rather unclear, and it is often left to the people to define it. But there are three major elements that I think make it very clearer for me anyway to define it. And the first thing is that it usually is organized around a secret. The constitutive element of infidelity is the secrecy. When it's not a secret, when it's consensual, it's a complete different story. So the secret is at the heart of infidelity.
So when your partner doesn't know or isn't aware.
That's right.
Then it's...
Yes, and of course that today requires you to ask what must be shared and what is private. What is the extent between privacy, secrecy, and transparency? Then the second element is a certain kind of emotional involvement to one degree or another, even if it's hit and run. There still is an emotional involvement. Mm-hmm. It takes effort to make something mean nothing.
Right?
Yeah. So the quality of that involvement with the person, with the sex, with the feelings, that. And then the third one, which is really the most important one, is that it's a sexual alchemy. The element of sexual alchemy is not sex. We know that most affairs are way less about sex and a lot more about desire. Now, desire for what? Desire to be desired, desire to be seen, to feel important, to have someone's attention, someone who cares about you, desire to feel alive, desire to reconnect with lost parts of yourself. Way more important than the sex itself. The kiss that you only imagine giving can be just as powerful as hours of actual lovemaking. The mind is the most important sexual organ. These three things, secrecy, emotional involvement, sexual alchemy, intersecting with each other, are the three central elements of what makes infidelity. But today, that we don't have religious institutions necessarily telling us what is the king of sins, it is left to us and our relationships to make sense of this, to define it, to know where our lines will be with our partners, to know when we cross those lines, and if it's about thinking, if it's about remembering, it's about fantasizing while you're with your partner, if it's... It is a subject that is deeply entrenched in our lives and often very difficult for us to open up. And yet we need to because we need to help people who suffer with it.
Rule number 4, look for decency in people.
My father was illiterate.
Okay.
My father and my mother, actually, both of them came to Belgium by chance after each of them being 4 and 5 years in concentration camps in Poland. They both were the sole survivors of their entire family. They came with absolutely nothing. They were illegal refugees for 5 years before they even became legalized. And my father always was a person who said, it doesn't matter how brilliant they are or how rich they are. What matters the most is how decent they are. And when you are in a concentration camp, you get to see the limits of a person's humanity and the stretch and the outreach of a person's humanity and their decency. And for some reason, that always stayed with me, meaning don't get impressed by all the appearances and by how everything looks. Look at the person. And then he said, and a friend is the person who will always do more for themselves as they will do for themselves. That's your friend. And check people out on that basis. And he had never read a book. He couldn't read and write pretty much. He read the newspaper. He spoke 5 languages, but poorly. And he was a grand human being. And I often think of him in relation to that, especially when I come into the entrepreneurial world, which is often a world of inflated selves.
Also, if you want more confidence and motivation, check out my 254 series, where every day for 254 days, I send you an amazing unlisted video via email for free. The links to join are in the description below.
Successful people do what they hate to get to where they want to be.
Because being a really, really good listener is one of the most underrated secrets to success.
So what you're going to have to do is you're going to basically get bounced around a lot. All over the place.
Rule number 5, seek positive changes.
There is a phenomenal crossing of parallel tracks that is happening currently. On the one hand, a matching set of expectations. You know, when you come to personal life, romantic life, the expectations that you would have with one person, what once an entire community used to provide. The same person is going to give us security and stability and dependability and reliability and predictability, and the same person is going to give us awe and mystery and passion and novelty and excitement and danger and fill in the bucket. This dual set of needs like that, you know, for most of history, marriage was for survival. Then we brought in the companionship, romantic element, and now we want relationships for self-actualization. Well, the same thing is happening at work. You know, you don't just you go to work and you don't plan to spend 20 years there and work your way up step by step. You know, the Wall Street Journal had an article I just read yesterday. It was called "Quitters Are Winners." It's like the more you leave, the faster you grow, kind of thing, and the more you're going to get better jobs. And this notion that after 2 years, something has to happen. And if you I used to say that you left marriages if you were very unhappy, and today you leave them if you think you could be happier. But the same thing happens with a job. You don't leave the job, because they close the factory. You leave the job because you don't feel that you have been promoted properly and fast enough.
Right.
And that rising on the Maslow ladder of needs, that notion that it's about self-actualization, about identity formation, about belonging, the fact that we bring to love market economy, and we talk about having a good deal in our relationships, but we bring to work a language and a vocabulary of relationships. We talk about authenticity, belonging, empathy, trust. When was that the bottom line language of business?
Rule number 6, regulate yourself.
Trust is something that gets cultivated over time through tests and experiences together with other people. Of course, this has changed because we have a share economy in which we are trusting total strangers with our home and our most precious belongings. So the whole definition of trust is shifting. But it's difficult to have a feeling of belonging when you don't stay long enough, or to have a feeling of belonging when you're hired by the day and by the hour because it suits the numbers of the company. And every book these days about relationships is going to talk about belonging or the lack thereof, and about loneliness or the isolation and the lack of connection. This is the two main subjects that everybody is talking about. Partly because when you dismantle a system like the one that we had and you introduce a new social system, you can become evangelical about it, you can be very happy about all the changes, but you have to deal with the consequences of the changes. And one of the things that Dan Siegel was talking about so beautifully yesterday is that an individual, a body, a society, a relationship needs to regulate itself. And one of the main things we regulate ourselves on is between stability and change, between chaos and rigidity, between the past and the future. When we have too much change going on all at once, we become ontologically anxious or anguished because we can't catch up, which is partly what is happening now and what has been propelled in the last year by the new president of this country and by the new presidents of a bunch of other countries and by the Me Too movement. It's a unique educational opportunity, but it makes a lot of people very nervous.
Rule number 7, own your mistakes.
There's only 2 relationships that resemble each other. The one you have with your parents or the people who raise you, and the one you have with the people you fall in love with. People can sit in my office all the time and say, I have this with no one else. I don't have this with anybody at work. Nobody among my friends ever thinks like that. You're the only one who speaks like this or thinks this about me or with whom I do this. No. You're the only one, and now we go back in history. And I'm sorry to be the psychologist, but that's really...
Right.
It is the place where we often learned about closeness, trust, loyalty, commitment, sharing, taking, receiving, asking, all these essential verbs of relationships. We learned that at home.
We also learned jealousy and all these other things.
Possessiveness, vengeance,
Yes.
you name them. The beauty
Anger.
and the not beauty.
Yeah, we saw it all as children, right? We saw the fights, we saw the love, we saw the,
We saw the coldness. We
the lack
saw
of intimacy, the
whole
intimacy,
thing.
yes.
Yes, and we bring that with us, and we often promise ourselves, I'll never be this one. I'll never be this way. I'll never talk like this. And we find ourselves often much
Doing it,
closer
right?
to the apple.
And then resenting ourselves.
Apple to the tree.
We resent ourselves. We're like, how did we do that? Well, why did we get to this place?
And then we feel ashamed about it. And since we don't like to feel ashamed about it, we hide it. And one of the way we hide it is we blame the partner. That's just one of the ways. There's a lot. We are very resourceful in not owning our shit.
Rule number 8, find a mentor.
Stand up if you have been blessed by having a mentor in the realm of relationships. Wow, nice, because I don't want to ask if you've had mentors in your business lives, because everybody will be standing. This inequity between having models for how you do business, but not having enough models for how you live your relationships needs to change. It really is foundational. And some of you, it may be your parents, and some of you, it may be the neighbor, and some of you, it may be somebody that you actually had never even met. But it is absolutely clear that having a mentor in the realm of relationship is essential for people to have something that they can aspire to and emulate. So take a moment for those of you who stand and thank them. And then make also mental note if you actually have ever told them. And if you haven't, it's a good idea. And don't wait till they're on their deathbed. And if you don't, then just ask yourself, who could you reach out to? Who would be someone to whom you could talk about that part of your life? It is not okay that therapists like me are often the only people to hear the stories and the truth. And especially now it's fake news on social media where everybody has to parade their joyous, happy lives. Nobody has any idea of what's happening in the lives of others. Your best friends can come and break up and you didn't even see it coming.
Rule number 9, have courage.
And then, when there is a crisis, when something breaks out, suddenly people launch into conversations that they've never had, and they are finally grappling with a level of honesty about this, but in the midst of so much pain.
And resentment and anger,
confusion, pain, rage, disappointment, romantic frustration, you name it. Like, could we do better? Can we do it sooner? Can we have the courage to have some of the difficult conversations before we're in the midst of a crisis?
And rule number 10, the last one before a very special bonus clip, is ask yourself questions.
You make a quick note to yourself. What's one thing that you need to do, at least before you see me again? Meaning you have a year. It's a long time. My patients, they have a week, or they have to tell me by 36 hours, I did X or I did Y. What is one thing that you could do concretely that doesn't have to be qualified and excused and defended and explained away, that would bring a different balance to where you put the best parts of you?
Now I've got a really special bonus clip that I think you're gonna enjoy, but before that, if you're still here watching and you promise, you commit that you're gonna take action after watching this video, you're not just gonna watch a video, you're gonna do something afterwards, give me a hashtag believe in the comments because I want to celebrate you.
It's important to have a sense of how do we map relationships? I think sometimes the word is kind of mystifying. And in fact, relationships are quite structured systems, in which you straddle two main axes. Structure, hierarchy, power, discipline, all the way down to chaos, and relatedness, from very close to very far distant and disengaged. Pretty much most relationships can be tracked there. But now you take your team and you look, how are we working here? Is this a very hierarchical, very set system? Nothing can happen. You have to go through 10 different people. Change is impossible, etc., etc. But it's very warm because we have a lot of closeness and it's camaraderie, but very inefficient. Or is it very distant, rather cold, but actually very structured and very efficient, but not very loving? You can map that, and then you begin to see what are the attributes that we have ample of, and what are the ones that need to be reinforced, and who can do that? Who can bring the pieces that the other people may not necessarily have, so that you create a real diversity that isn't only about gender and race and background, but it is actually about relational capacities.
If you want to see the top 10 I did on Marissa Peer, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
If you keep talking about the symptom, your mind keeps it alive, because whatever you focus on, you get more of.
I don't like wish. Wishing says to your mind,